other. You're with Julian on the Brown Note and a review of the possibly final Mission Impossible film. I kind of hope it is The Final Reckoning, which came out in May this year and is now on streaming. Mission Impossible has been basically all that Tom Cruise has done this century. Even though the first film was way back in 96, so 30 years nearly that he's been doing this. And he's occasionally branched out into other things, but it's really been his baby. And I've said in the past, it was like the Fast and the Furious franchise, where the first few films weren't quite there, or they didn't really get to the point they would get to. So 1 and 2, they're watchable, but I wouldn't say they were great. It was really Mission Impossible 3 in 2006, where it really kind of took off. Even though the film was less successful, the Philip Seymour Hoffman villain and the storyline were much better. And then we got an incredible run where it really became the top tier of that sort of James Bond-esque actioner, with Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation and Fallout all being spectacularly good films and absolutely state-of-the-art when it came to that kind of film. And then Dead Reckoning Part 1 came out, which was supposed to be part of a filmed at the same time continuation double whammy. Exactly what Fast and the Furious did, and exactly the same as Fast and the Furious when they released X. The film was a bit of a flop, and then they sort of moved away from the fact that it was going to be Part 1 and 2, even though it clearly is. So Dead Reckoning Part 1 got Barbenheimered. So it did very poorly at the box office compared to previous releases and the insane cost. And then they kind of went on the back burner and rewrote a lot of stuff. All these films, Christopher McQuarrie from Rogue Nation is a director. So they went away, they did reshoots, they did rewrites. So basically in Dead Reckoning Part 1, we see this Russian submarine which has this AI capability, and it's been infected by a virus. That virus takes over the submarine and causes the crew to accidentally blow themselves up. And years later, we've got this thing called the Entity. I have a massive problem with computers that control all of the computers in the world being used as a plot device. In fact, I think they did it about 3 times in a row in the Fast and the Furious. There's always, there's a device that will control all of the world's computers. It's like, the more interesting aspect here was the AI notion of it controlling every single communication online. So it was manipulating people into behaving a certain way based on algorithms. So the most interesting part of that Dead Reckoning was the idea that whatever you were doing has probably made you do it. So it was always second guessing everything. It was a decent film, but it was the least good since 3. And there was this great villain in it as well. Isai Morales as Gabriel. He was excellent. He was kind of like the sage or the representative in human form of the Entity. And the Entity had basically taken over every computer on Earth, which was leading it to possibly taking over all of the nuclear weapons sites and so on. I saw a thing, and I don't know if it's true, that 80% of the world's nuclear weapons are currently under AI control. They tried to warn us in the Terminator films. It's like we took it as advice to do. So it was a decent film, but it repeated itself for the first time. I thought the franchise was getting repetitive by that film, and we got Hayley Atwell in as is Tom Cruise just going around hoovering up every English rose? It was a bit weird. Because we had Rebecca Ferguson for the previous couple of films, who was great. And it's kind of like she just replaced her with a like-for-like swap. And we also have Vanessa Kirby, another one. And it was just like, you just trying to pick every English rose out there to make them your action person. But it was a good film. I mean, there was some great stuff in there, but I think indicative of how they were kind of not breaking new barriers was the train thing. The train thing obviously cost a fortune, the final battle on the train. But we've seen trains going off of bridges in so many different films, including The Fast and the Furious. So it wasn't like it was a new paradigm, unlike that skyscraper in Ghost Protocol, which was, no one had ever seen anything like that. It was amazing. But we have seen people fighting on trains that are about to go over a bridge. And this film does the same thing with biplanes. We've seen people fighting on biplanes from the 1920s, I believe. It's almost like they're going back over action movie history, trying to recreate them, but actually spend $100 million doing so. So this does pretty much take off from the last one. So it's so convoluted they spend virtually the entire first hour explaining the previous film to you. So there's a key. The key opens this submarine, the AI system in the submarine's original source code, and can be used to kill the AI called the entity that's controlling the world. So Tom Cruise ended that film with the key, which Gabriel thought he had, but we find out he didn't. And since then, he's been on the run. So this is a direct sequel, and pretty much the cast are the same. And they spend an inordinate amount of time explaining what happened in the previous film and doing a sort of a sentimental journey down the path of the previous Mission Impossible films, which is pretty good. That comes up quite a few times. Although they don't actually go into his past, Ethan Hunt's past, as much as I thought they would. Because we kind of get this first meeting with him and Gabrielle and him being accused of murder and joining the Mission Impossible team to avoid jail. But they don't go into any more detail in this film, which is odd. I don't know if that was part of the rewrite that was left on the floor. And this time around, it's the same story, which is him trying to get to the submarine to try and get that key into the submarine thing, which is at the bottom of the Antarctic or wherever it is, to get the code from that submarine so they can use it to destroy the code of the entity. And the whole world is on the brink of nuclear collapse because every nuclear nation in the world, their own nuclear systems are taken offline one by one. So they're counting down to when only America will have its nuclear arsenal under its own control. At which point America will launch a preemptive nuclear strike on all of the other nations with nuclear missiles, including Israel. I don't know how they felt about being included in this mix, but the idea being that if they can destroy the command structures of the other countries with nuclear weapons, the entity won't be able to fire them at everyone else. And the entity is apparently going to hide for hundreds and hundreds of years in this, basically a seed vault. If you've ever seen that Norwegian seed vault, where it's underground in this mass bunker and would survive a nuclear holocaust, doesn't make any sense at all. None. It's a timer ticking down to when America will launch its nuclear missiles to obliterate London and all these other places. There was a good nod in the film to a 1960s paranoia Cold War thriller, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but where they actually had to blow up New York. So America has accidentally destroyed Moscow, and to avoid nuclear war, they blow up New York. And they're going to do the same thing here. I thought that was a nice nod to what's going on. Obviously the action is impeccable and Tom Cruise does his own stunts, but I felt like it was for the sake of it. It's a very long film at 3 hours and sumptuous entertainment, really. But there were a number of problems I had with this film. One is the cast in the previous films, where we had people like Rebecca Ferguson and Vanessa Kirby coming through to great impact. That doesn't happen with the newbies here. Hayley Atwell just sort of coos at Tom Cruise, but her character lives in a bubble of it's like there's no past with her, really. she's like a non-entity. I don't know why you wouldn't have carried on with the brilliant Rebecca Ferguson character, who had a massive backstory. There's no story with Hayley Atwell. Van Rhymes, what happened with him? Ving Rhames, I don't even know how to say it, but Luther, he barely appeared in the last film. He's the OG with Simon Pegg and Tom Cruise. He's the one that's been there from the first film, and he was barely in the last film, and he's barely in this film. I don't understand why. So we get a lot more sort of perfunctory new additions. I don't know whether that's to make the next Mission Impossible films. Another one is Pom Klementieff, who was the Dweedlebopper girl from Guardians of the Galaxy. She had a great character in Dead Reckoning, and they just don't develop the character anymore. She just hangs around for the entire movie. There's obviously, it's 400 million allegedly on the budget due to a lot of things going wrong. I thought the submarine sequence, the underwater submarine sequence, was superb. Very, very long, very tense, this submarine rolling along. And that whole extreme scenario I thought was really good. I thought the biplane stuff, it was just... I don't know why they did it. This is like the spoiler alerts, but this is kind of like the apex of the film, is this biplane scenario. One, we've already had the helicopter scenario from Fallout, which was better. And two, it was just like, let's do biplanes because they used to do biplane stunts in films, and we can make it in 4K, a ridiculously high definition, and have Tom Cruise actually hanging off the biplanes, which I just felt it was performative, like more for the actors than it was for people watching. It certainly didn't feel as state-of-the-art as Tom Cruise hanging off of that skyscraper, or even the helicopter chase in the previous one. In fact, it's repetitive because we get to see Tom Cruise hang on the bottom of a biplane, climb up, take control of the biplane twice in a row. Why twice in a row? It's like, you've already just done this. And the whole sequence is Tom Cruise is half of what's going to kill the entity, and the Gabrielle character has the other half. So why is Gabrielle trying to knock him out of the sky? Makes no sense. Even the very end, so spoiler alert, Tom Cruise seems to keep the entity when the whole 4-5 hours of film has been relentlessly about him wanting to kill the entity because none of the world's governments could be trusted to use it. And apparently keeps it at the end. So there's quite a lot of problems with this. The level of exposition is through the roof. A lot of the individual scenarios don't really weigh up much. And I thought, some of the times when they bring back people from previous films in it were good. Like they have people from the first Mission Impossible film and they tie it back to that one. And that was really good as well. It's just a lot of it just doesn't make any sense. And I didn't think that the majority of people on screen were as captivating as the cast of Ghost. Like we used to have Jeremy Renner and Paula Patton and Rebecca Ferguson and Vanessa Kirby, who doesn't appear here at all for some reason, were much more magnetic and charismatic and interesting people. Whereas the newbies here really did feel like they were from a lesser franchise and not that interesting if they're going to continue going along with it. It is, it's top tier, it's expensive, it's long, it's great for home watching, as I just did on 4K, but ultimately it is a lesser film even than Dead Reckoning, which is a shame. Dead Reckoning was the worst since 3, and it's about the same quality as 3, but nothing feels like it matters. Nothing feels like there's this incredible urgency about the characters and their lives together, and also the stakes. It just feels like a lesser film. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a rough one to go out on, because I think the franchise overall is excellent and very rewatchable. And I've got no complaints that this is a bad movie. I just don't feel like that it is. I don't understand what they rewrote to make it like it is. So I'm going to give Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning a 7 out of 10.